Welcome, everybody. We are going to get started in just a few minutes. We're going to let people get into the room. Hope everyone's having a great end of August. Bittersweet for sure. We're just waiting a few more minutes to start. Okay, I think we'll start. We have a really exciting program. The summer interns from Biodiversity Builders are going to be presenting about their work over the summer with the program. And I know we're all excited to hear that, but we have a few housekeeping things to start. I'm Renee Scott. I'm the Massachusetts Pollinator Network Coordinator for NOFA, and I'm really excited to see everybody again. It's been a fun summer. We had a really terrific conference in Worcester, and I don't know if any of you were able to go. I hope you were. There were lots of great programs, and for the first time ever, we had a pollinator track, and we had some really engaging and educational presentations. And if anyone is interested, and actually during the presentation, I will drop the link in the chat. Anyone who wasn't able to attend or register, you can pay now to get access to all of the programs that were offered. If you did register for the conference, then you should have already received the email. So if you have registered and you did not receive an email, go ahead and you can just contact me and I can help you get the links to that. Also, let's see, we have a couple bills to support. I just wanted to draw your attention to. One is national, and it's about pollinator-friendly plant labels from the USDA. I'm going to drop a link into the chat where you can actually write a letter to, unfortunately, there are only 7 co-sponsors right now, and neither of our senators are co-sponsoring unless they did so today. So definitely want to get them to, sorry, I'm going to put the wrong link in the chat. Let me fix that. We would love to get Warren and Marquis to sponsor this bill. It would require that plants be labeled as native and not have pesticides. So that's really important. It would be a federal bill. So definitely, if you have a moment and are able to, sorry, I'm not able to do 2 things at once. Let me get you this link and I will continue explaining about it. Okay, let's try that. So if you are able to write a quick letter, you can go to this link. It's a preset letter that you can alter, but it will go directly to our senators and encourage them to co-sponsor. The other action you can take is local. Pre my time with NOFA, but some of you may be very familiar with Rep. Dykema, who was a real pollinator activist in the legislature, and she left for other work. But the gentleman who took her seat is James Arena de Rosa, and he is picking up some of her bills, and one of which is the one I'm going to now put into the chat. And this is about neonic regulation. And so it's another one that if you are in, if you go to the second link and you send a letter, it will go to your personal representatives and ask them to sign on and support it. If you happen to be in Rep. Arena de Rosa's district, thank him. I think he's trying to do the right thing, and it would be really helpful for him to hear from people saying, thank you for doing this, and keep up the good work. So those are 2 actions you can take, and that would be great. The last thing I'm going to drop in the chat before I introduce our next topic is we have quite a few job openings at NOFA. We need awesome people, and this group is full of awesome people. So if you have any interest, or you think of people that might be interested, please send them our way. And the last order of business before we have our guests speak is, I'm just curious if I'm going to open up the floor briefly if anyone has anything pressing, timely information about, that they want to share with this network about things that are going on in their towns or their organizations. So if you want to share something briefly, raise your hand and I will, or raise your hand, I'll call on you, and then you can just unmute and let us know. Okay, awesome. So I am delighted to introduce the Biodiversity Builder Summer Interns. The Biodiversity Builders Youth Program, it was created and is operated as a nonprofit by our own Jean Devine, who's joined us for this meeting. It's a paid learning experience that gives high school and college youth agency in doing good things for the environment. And you can learn more at the link I'm going to drop in the chat right now. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Anne-Marie.
Hey, hi everybody. So I'm Anne-Marie, and as mentioned, I'm part of Biodiversity Builders. I was this past summer, and I'm here with my 3 friends from the program, Shama, Z, and Lena today to talk to y'all about Biodiversity Builders and how amazing it is. So you probably already know the general idea of what Biodiversity Builders is, but just to make it a little bit more clear for you, here's our mission, vision, and value statements that we wrote together as a group. So our mission, basically our goal, is to promote biodiversity and education of nature, plants, and pollinators in the greater Boston areas, teaching local customers about ecological garden solutions by advertising native plants, such as our lovely Rudbeckia hirta as seen decorating this slide. Our vision is more gardens than grass, specifically native gardens. And our values we came up with were to bring biodiversity back into green areas, to save local ecosystems from humanity's harm, to learn through doing, to find beauty in the chaos, and to push people nicely. So now that we've reviewed what Biodiversity Builders is, let's move on to what we actually did together. So on our first day, we all met up at the Biodiversity Garden in Alewife and introduced ourselves. It was an extremely open and welcoming first day, which was really nice since most people didn't really know each other. And we spent a lot of time at Payson Park, where we learned about different types of soil, worked on the native garden there, and made our nature journals, which we'll talk about later. And here's us learning more about the Alewife Garden with Jean, where we'd spend lots and lots of time making it more diverse and fighting our rival, the monoculture, due to the extremely aggressive Canada goldenrod. So there's a little summary of our first week in the program, and now I'll hand it off to Shama to talk about the second week.
Hello, everybody. I'm Shama. So on our second week, we were given a tour of the Mount Auburn Cemetery, and Mount Auburn is the first garden cemetery in the country. It was founded in 1831 and is about 170 acres. We learned about the native plant projects and animals located in the cemetery from salamander, bird, and plant experts. And in the cemetery, there were many willow and oak trees, which are great natives. We saw a lot of American toads hopping around from pond to pond, and it was an amazing experience to walk around the huge and beautiful landscape and see what they've done with the place. So we came up with our mission, vision, and values for the program after a presentation from Krista, one of our college mentors at the Alewife office. So this was in week 2. And Jean also taught us about different pollinators and what plants they're attracted to. For examples, bees prefer flowers with easy to access pollen, and moths like white flowers because they're easy to see at night, and hummingbirds like nectar from bright red long flowers. And on the third week, we split into different groups and worked at different houses around Arlington. Did weeding, planting, mapping the garden, and moving mulch. This image is from a client's garden that is on the pollinator pathways map, and it was actually available to take a tour in August for the pollinator pathways. So a pollinator pathway is basically a corridor for native plants that provides nutrition and habitat for pollinating insects and birds. And because most native pollinators and bees can't travel that far, the pollinator pathways allow them to get to plants a lot more easily. We also went to Magazine Beach, where we removed different invasive plants and got a tour of the nature preservation. There we found many black swallowwort plants along the railings. This invasive plant rapidly spreads through seed pods. That's why we called ourselves the Pod Patrol, because we were picking out the pods so they wouldn't spread. And monarch butterflies actually often mistake them for their host plants, milkweed. So it's very good to remove the pods. The same week, we toured Habitat, another nature preserve in Belmont. We worked in their garden removing invasives, and the plants that were removed were either put in leaf bags or thrown in their compost bin. We then walked along the path and saw the ponds as well as the goats they used to graze down invasive plants along the path. And any big invasive plants or tree parts were used in a long pile, which allows Habitat to easily remove invasive species while also creating an environment for small creatures that would live beneath the branches. And lastly, we saw their new native plant garden with aster, blue vervain, milkweed, and we split up into groups to design shade and sun gardens as a fun activity. So now I'm going to hand it off to Lena.
So week 4 was an extremely hot week. It was probably the hottest week of the entire program. That week, we visited the Arlington Parish Church and the Arlington Reservoir, where we did a ton of invasive plant removal, as well as the planting of native species. While we were at the Arlington Church, we got a lot of, sorry, give me a second. We did a ton of invasive plant removal, as well as the planting of native species. And while we were at the Arlington Church, we got a lot of hands-on experience on garden planting. We dug out and relocated plants that may be accessed in a certain area and replanted them in other areas that may be lacking in those plants. We also spent time splitting the garden into sections and labeling each species of plants one by one. When we were done, we turned it into a giant map. On Thursday, we went to Arlington Reservoir, where we met with some of the staff members, where they talked about the purpose of the Arlington Reservoir, as well as how it affected the water quality that we needed for everyday use. While we were there, we mostly did garden work and made sure that the garden was organized and clean. We also had a few students prepare for farmer market that week, which happens every Thursday. They promoted the native plant sale and made a scavenger hunt for the kids, which taught them about native plants, and some adults actually ended up joining as well. That was pretty much it for week 4, and then came week 5, which was the week of the sale. Part of Biodiversity Builders program was empowering students to run a business. Building up to August 3rd, which was the day of the sale, we worked on advertisement, organization, and inventory. Shama and I were part of finance and operations, or FIOP for short. Our job consisted of keeping track of the plants that we were buying and their sales costs. As you can see, we used Google Sheets to color code different characteristics, such as the amount of sun a plant needed or what moisture level the soil required. The marketing team worked on advertising through designing and spreading posters around the surrounding towns, as well as through social media. and the HR team was in charge of keeping everyone motivated throughout our work and the day of the plant sale. Our group also created a Google form to keep track of customer data. This meant what plants they were buying and the total price. Our sale ran from 3 to 7 p.m. at the Alewife Reservation. As soon as we started, there were a bunch of customers waiting in line, and we had 3 sets of tables for different plants depending on the amount of sun they needed. Many of us were tasked with helping customers pick out their perfect plants, and when they were done picking out the plants, they would come over to check out. The plants that sold out first were the butterfly milkweeds and the bee balms, and the ferns sold the slowest, but fortunately, we were sold out by the end of the day. The Alewife Reservation also had an Alewife Showcase Garden. This garden was founded by Ellen Mass Stewart, the founder and honorary member of Friends of Alewife Reservation, Jean Devine, the executive director of Biodiversity Builders and Native Plant Specialist and Educator, and Amy Myrtle, which is the assistant professor of biology of Lesley University. They all worked together to get the garden permitted from the Department of Conservation and Recreation and Cambridge Conservation and Commission. The project aims to form an ecologically diverse meadow and shrub garden using native plants. Many customers want to see inside the garden, so some of our biodiversity members gave them tours. When we were done with the sale, we ordered some pizza to celebrate our success. And earlier in the week, we also had the members of the organization Save the Alewife Brook come over to talk with us about sewage issues. The sewage from the surrounding towns, such as Belmont, Cambridge, and Arlington, were all being dumped into the Alewife Brook, making the water there unclean and polluted. And at the end of their presentation, we also got some cool shirts and stickers. I will now pass it on to Z.
Our final week was a little hectic as we got rained out and had a little bit of a worm problem. Tuesday had some rain, but some of us got to help with client work instead. Some students, including Shama and I, helped Jean in the afternoon to plant a garden. That's where we first saw evil invasive jumping worms. We had never seen them before and didn't expect that at our next location they would make another appearance. While there, we split into teams to take out the Japanese knotweed. Some of us carried the giant plants, while others dug them up, with a few people disposing of the invasive worms. Before we left, we cleaned our tools and our shoes to prevent the spread of their eggs. Although our trip may have ended with some tears due to the uncomfortably excessive wiggling of the worms' bodies, we still had a lot of fun. To close up our week, we talked to Dave Rogers, a state representative, and gave him a tour of our garden. All throughout our 6 weeks together, we were working hard at our independence projects, filling in our nature journals, and using Seek and iNaturalist to participate in citizen science, which was a first for a lot of us. Once a week, every week, we got let off an hour early to work on our independent projects. Everybody got time to focus on the parts of gardening that they were interested in. Some people did drawings, identifying invasive plants and their native alternatives. Others built their own gardens, working even when health problems caused them to struggle. Anne-Marie, whom you met earlier, made recipes using native plants, even turning them into reality. She made really good dandelion dumplings that she shared with us. I made drawings to compare native and invasive species that look similar that took way too long to make. And some people made specialized presentations on birds and cattails, or types of trees that interested them. The projects we made helped many of us connect lots of the things that we were learning about to something that interested us. Our projects also helped connect us with the people we met as we found common interests with them. Throughout the weeks we spent working, we made observations in our nature journals. Although some of us weren't too diligent using their extra pages for some things they were unintended for, others drew some amazing drawings based off their observations. To help us identify the many plants we saw, we used Seek and iNaturalist. Seek was our favorite, but we used iNaturalist to learn about citizen science and also post pictures of the Owl Garden to monitor it. So to wrap it up, I'll just state some of the many things that we got from biodiversity builders. We were all taught skills to plan out native gardens, remove invasive plants, plant native plants, reorganize invasive and native plants around us, bond with people with similar interests, participate in business divisions, participate in citizen science, and to add on, Jean is amazing.
So now we'll be asking for any questions you guys have.
You guys, that was really awesome. Anne-Marie, do you want to stop sharing so we can see your faces?
Oh, we do have a different part after questions.
Oh, great. Oh, good. Yeah. If anyone has a question, just raise your hand, and then any one of you feel free to just call in people. I'll start. I have a question. What is are you all in high school?
Yeah, we all go to Belmont High School.
Okay. And is this something, were you interested in plants before this project?
I think I was. You guys were too, right?
Yeah, I would like
Yeah.
for a lot of us, it was kind of like developing in a new area. Like I specialized in succulents before.
Awesome.
For me, I was interested, but I knew basically nothing about plants.
But now you know a ton, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. It's great.
That's great. Brucey, do you have a question?
Yes, sorry, and I was making background noise. I meant to have my sound muted. Apologies. So I have a question. Yes. Based on your experience this summer with biodiversity builders, have you had a chance yet to think about what you might want to do next that relates to what you did this summer?
Well, I was thinking of starting a foraging club in my school. That's not really that related to biodiversity builders, but my independent project was based on like foraging different weeds and using that as like a sustainable source of food.
As for me, I wanted to start a nonprofit organization on environmental conservation because I was very inspired by Miss Jean this year. She did a really good job teaching.
I agree.
We have
What most
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. What most interested you about this experience, removing invasive plants, planting natives, or I feel like the experience was really fun because of the people. Like, I know I made like a lot of friends. Like, removing invasive plants wasn't like fun in and of itself, but when like our mentor Krista put on music, it was like a dance party. It was so fun. What'd you guys enjoy?
For me, I actually enjoyed the removal of invasive species the most because like I don't know, I just found something about pulling out the plants like so much fun.
I really
Yeah.
liked the invasive pulls as well. That was like the funnest part. Like I got like chopped down the tree of heaven.
Yeah. I would say like first looking at the program description, what really drew me to it was the idea that we get to spend time with a bunch of other people and learn because I didn't know too much about native plants. And so I like that one of Jean's Jean's motto was always learning, and I think that, like, I guess that was the main thing that drew me to it, because I was excited to um like have a new opportunity and learn new stuff.
It seems that Miss Colson has a question.
Thank you. It's so funny. I live in Princeton, New Jersey, though I lived in Arlington a number of years ago. And I heard about you through, there's a group of high school students in Princeton who've been clearing invasive species from an old growth forest area at the edge of town. And about a year ago, I thought, you guys are like living my dream, right? Because had thought about a year ago, I said to some of the kids, I said, you know what? You don't just have to be babysitters. You have a very valuable set of skills and knowledge that you could put to use and help people in their, I mean, it would be very, what I heard about this, and through the woman who organized that group, Dr. Trish Shanley, and I'm just thrilled to know that what I thought is something that people are already doing, you all. So I'd love to know, I guess my question is, I'd love to be able to be in touch with you all going forward, because maybe we can borrow some of your, replicate what you're doing here.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, if
Oh,
you
that's
want
awesome.
to get in contact with us, you can contact Miss Jean. I can type her email in the comments in the chat.
It's great. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? All right. Now that we're done with the questions, we are going to teach you guys 12 new plants. 6 of them are invasive species that you should look out for, and the other 6 are native species, which would be great for your garden. These are our 6 invasives, and first up we have nightshade.
So that's
Yeah, okay. It was the first plant that I learned when I joined this group, and it is a very, very invasive species. They grow really rapidly and spreads really quickly, so you can often find them in your own garden or in random areas on the street. You can recognize them by their tiny diamond-shaped petals that can be in any color. And the leaves often have a bunch of holes in them since aphids love eating them. Nightshade is also highly poisonous, especially the berries. You should pull them out immediately if you see them to keep your children or dogs from eating them, because consumption of those berries can make them very sick and can even be fatal. There are, however, some exceptions. There are a lot of vegetables that we eat that come from the nightshade family. Tomatoes are one of them. And the berries on the black nightshade are poisonous, but some regions like to boil and cook them once they turn ripe, which makes them edible. The red berries are called bittersweet nightshade. They are not edible and they are highly poisonous. Next up, we have the black swallowwort, which, like we were saying earlier, these plants trick the monarch butterfly into laying their eggs on the leaves. But since they don't have any nutritional value for the baby monarch butterflies, they end up starving to death. If you open up a seed pod, the inside will be full of white fur and seeds. If you cannot remove the plant itself, the next best thing to do is to pull out the seed pods so it can't have a new generation of plants. And next, we have Oriental bittersweet, which is also a very invasive plant. They suck out the nutrients of surrounding plants, and they often try to compete with small shrubs and trees by wrapping itself around them and therefore strangling them. If they are not removed, it can cause a monoculture of Oriental bittersweet, which is when there is only one crop or plant in a given area. And if there is only a monoculture and no diversity in plants, the ecosystem cannot thrive. So be sure to remove it as soon as you see it.
Our next plant is Tree of Heaven, which is also very invasive. Something that we learned throughout our program is that not every tree is good, although we may want to believe that. Tree of Heaven is a host plant for the spotted lanternfly, which, if you've ever been to New York or talked to somebody living there, it's become a real issue. As they and they're quite difficult to tell because they can look similar to a lot of like native bushes called that are sumacs called the one that they look most similar to is staghorn sumac, although there are a few tells that you can find that can be difficult if the trees are getting eaten or there's bugs, which makes it even worse. Next is Phragmites. Phragmites isn't very good because they are quite aggressive and can cause large swaths of monoculture where they kind of just take over while pushing out any of the native plants that would be in an area. Although they are good for some things, which they do create an okayish habitat for bugs, they aren't very good for any of the other animals that usually would use those areas. For example, Phragmites isn't strong enough, unlike cattails, for birds to sit on them. Birds like to use cattails to like sit and get prey, and Phragmites pushes them out. Our last plant is knotweed, which is very frustrating as a plant because unless you can completely get out their roots and you literally can't get rid of them unless you come back year after year. As if you miss any of the rhizomes and crowns in the soil, they'll just come back. So it can take a lot of effort for you to just get rid of them.
All right, so now that we're done with all those strangling, poisonous invasives, we're going to review some brighter plants, the native plants. So wild bee balm over here is aka wild bergamot or Monarda fistulosa, is in the mint family and attracts a lot of specialist bees, bumblebees, predatory wasps, hummingbirds, and hawk moths. So it's like really, really good for pollinators. Great to have in your garden. Staghorn sumac, which was mentioned before, its lookalike tree of heaven, is not to be confused with poisonous sumac. It has red berries instead of white or green ones. It's this shrub here with red cones. It grows everywhere in the Northeast, even near highways, and you can harvest these berries and make sumac lemonade, which is really good, by the way. Now for butterfly milkweed, which is really popular and a lot of you might know, this plant is a habitat to monarch butterflies and it's vital to the species' survival. So it's really, really great to have in your garden.
Okay, so the other three are blue vervain, and so I'll just talk briefly about that. Blue vervain is a flowering plant that you can find in the LA Showcase Garden. It's a really beautiful plant, and it's a very unique looking one. It thrives in wet areas, which makes sense because our garden is right next to the brook, and it's pretty swampy there. It's a great addition to a rain garden because it likes wet areas, and it's generally not too aggressive, which is good. And it's great for pollinators, but it's also great for birds, which is interesting. I think it's bumblebees, honeybees, butterflies, hummingbirds, and moths will all use the blue vervain for nectar, but there's also a lot of songbirds that will eat the tiny seeds in the winter. So it's a great plant to have in the garden. It's pretty and it attracts a lot of different insects and animals. Great. So next, I'll talk about the broadleaf cattail. So the broadleaf cattail, as Z said earlier, is great for birds because it's pretty stable, so small birds can actually perch on it, and it's entirely edible to humans. Indigenous people used to use the plants all year round and would eat parts of the plant. It says that the flowering stalks could be boiled and eaten, like kind of like corn on the cob, which is really interesting. And its Latin name is actually Typha latifolia. So pretty cool plant, and obviously native to North and South America. But it's also native to Eurasia, Africa. So cool plant. Red columbine is another really beautiful plant. This plant is the kind that hummingbird would like because of its structure. It's perfect for the beak and the tongue, and it's a bright red plant, which hummingbirds tend to flock to because pollinators and most insects don't go to these plants, so they know there's a lot of nectar in it. This plant likes a light to moderate shade, but it can also do good in a full sun if it's given the right moisture. And it's a perennial plant like most natives, and it's really cool and pretty. So another great addition to any garden. Thank you for listening.
That's the end.
Oh, yay,
Thank
bravo.
you.
Thank you all. We have some questions in the chat. Let me see. What didn't we get to? I think we are okay. So Heidi asks, she says, invasive plant removal is so important. Have you thought of ways to educate the public? Many have no idea what they've got in their yards. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, it could be helpful to put like notifications of things that are real issues and like communal areas where people like pass by. Because although not many people stop, at least like some people will be like, oh, what's this? And then once they realize, oh, wait, I may have this in my garden, they may like think about it more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can add something.
Oh, Jean, you move yourself.
You-
yeah.
Oh, yay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I can add, our group was so busy, but we did go to the 3 towns of Arlington, Belmont, and Cambridge. And if we needed to have more work, the college students and I talked about making little posters and going around to people's houses saying, you've got blah, blah, blah in your yard. Contact us and we'll come back and remove it. So that's a tactic I've used in the past when I taught my group in Cambridge. This year, I mixed all the high school students from all 3 schools, Cambridge, Arlington, and Belmont, and we all went together to all the places. But if we had more time, that's a way of letting people know what they don't know in their own yard, so.
I think that was the last actual question in the chat. If I am missing one and you had a question, please speak up. And obviously, if you have a question that's not in the chat, raise your hand and let's hear it. I have a question for you all. After doing this whole program, I'd love to hear if you each had just fell in love with a particular plant, and then conversely, if there was a particular invasive that it felt like it was your nemesis and you just never want to see it again, or you want to see it and just rip it out. Like, did you feel strongly about any plants?
I think I particularly like swamp milkweed because um, it's so beautiful and it's great for monarchs. I mean, obviously all the milkweeds are good for monarchs. They're great host plants. Um, but I think monarchs particularly like them. And I would say one invasive that was just very persistent and annoying, and I remember removing a lot of was knotweed, Japanese knotweed. We found, well, that was at Rock Meadow in Belmont, but it was also at the Arlington Reservoir, and it just they were huge plants, and it was very difficult to remove them. And also, if you don't get all of the root, they just grow back. So it's pretty annoying.
For me, I really liked Wild Bee Balm because they had so many different versions of it. And I really like the name Bee Balm. And for an invasive species that I really hate, it's going to be nightshade. It's really easy to remove, so I really like pulling it out, but I keep seeing them everywhere I go.
Oh my gosh, same. I really like staghorn sumac. I think it tastes really good, but also like it's just so persistent. It's like everywhere, like near highways, and it's like native. It's a little, I think it's very, very common, but I really like it. Um, and for something that I hate is probably black swallowwort because every time like I'm walking somewhere, I always see it on a fence and I just gotta paw patrol. It's like, oh my gosh. By the time I'm done, like my pockets are full and like my hands are sticky and like, oh my gosh.
Agree.
Yeah, Emery even made sumac lemonade for
Yeah,
our plant
so
sale.
good.
That was crazy.
Right.
For me, I kind of just became obsessed with invasive plants. I I literally just like had so much fun learning about invasive plants. And now I'm kind of obsessed with like black swallowwort and tree of heaven. So whoever commented about like that they have scent glands under the bumps so that they stink, I did not know that. And I was like, I found that like I like those two because they were both very annoying and it was so much fun and they were the only ones that you could figure like you could tell what they were easily. Or well, after a little while.
We have another question. How can you ID the invasive worms?
Oh.
Ooh, so, well, me and Z were like, we had a lot of experience with those invasive worms. So they're called Asian jumping worms, and they tend to be a lot like thicker and bigger, and the little strap that they have is also like more pronounced, and it's bigger, it's more white, I would say. But the biggest tell is that they're going to be on the surface because the reason why they're so bad is because they will eat the nutrients off the surface of the soil, which is bad for the plants. And that's why we really don't like them. So when you pick them up, or apparently if you put them in like mustard or like a vinegar mix or something, they'll like slither like a snake, which regular European earthworms can't do. So they'll make like an S snake shape, and that's the main way we would tell.
Yeah.
Their movement is really irregular. So although they may just like you pick them up and they may play dead for a little while, if you hold them up for long enough, they will squirm very harshly and very rapidly. So you want to hold on to them tight. But they also, if you hold them up to the sun, they'll kind of like glow rainbowish in a way. You would not expect worms to be turn rainbow in the sun, but apparently these ones do.
Mm. They're slimy. Slimy.
So is this a program that you can all repeat, or maybe that's a question for Jean? Is this like you take someone one time and then a new group, or?
I like to give the opportunity to as many people as possible. So I do start anew. But one thing that really worked well this year that I would like to repeat is my college student, Krista, had been my high school student a few years ago. And then, in between, she was part of the Belmont Climate Action Club, which I advised on their native plant garden. So I got to see her, but not very much. And then this summer, she approached me and said, "Can I work with you?" And her having had that experience, I think really sort of prepared her, but she also was just like, really into being a mentor and creating curriculum and leading the students and bringing music and fun. So that part worked. So maybe when these students are heading for college, they'll have a job with me. I'll probably work with a few. These 4 are from Belmont High School, but I had students from Arlington High as well as Cambridge High. And a few of the Arlington, 3 of my students had just graduated from high school. So they're going on to college. So they're probably more ready to come back as a college student than these still have 2 more years. So.
That's great. And Jean, how many years have you been doing this program?
The high school, I started by working with younger students, but the high school one since 2017. What is that? Like 6 years? 17, 18,
6,
19.
yeah.
Yeah, 7 years.
It's amazing.
This is my best year ever. So there. And the sale was the best sale ever. What they didn't say, Z had to be traffic cop, which kept her busy from the moment 3 o'clock. I told them the sale went from 3 to 7, and I said, "Oh, you won't get any business till about 5 because people are working." But at 3 o'clock, the parking lot was full, and Z was pulling her hair out trying to direct cars. So that was really funny. And we sold out, but they didn't say, we really sold out at like 6, and we had 1 more hour to kill. So I called my husband and I said, "I have a few more plants on a bench. Can you bring those over?" So we sold everything. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy. People were asking for plants from the garden, like just dig them out and give them to me. This was crazy.
That's great. Any other, question, where did the plants come from? Heidi's wondering.
I can probably answer that best because I had to source from 2 places. Checker Spot Farm. If Jocelyn DeMuth is on this call, shout out to Checker Spot. They're in Coleraine, Mass. I worked with them last year as well. So about half came from Checker Spot and half came from Native Plant Trust. Oh, and the ones that my husband pulled from my house were from Bagley Pond. So I had a few more of those in my inventory. Oh, there's Heidi. Yay, Checker Spot. I know. Great plants. Yeah. So.
And let's see, we have another question. Does Belmont High have a sustainability club as Arlington does?
2 on this call want to start aspects of sustainability to the club system at Belmont. Both Anne Marie and Lena and Z, I guess, are working with Lena, but they currently have something called the Climate Action Club. And that group has been responsible for bringing the first ever native plant garden to the high school. I think you guys know better. There may be another environmental club where people talked about protesting and going to rallies. Did you know of that club?
There was a club where they would go to different places and pick up trash, and I think they did some protesting and stuff like that. Yeah.
We have another question from Anna. Do you have any written outline for your program so we and other parts of the state can use your ideas? How did you approach the schools to initiate the program?
Well, it's proprietary information. No, I have a curriculum, and I got a grant last year to document my curriculum, which is something that my associate Sky and I are doing, with the idea of creating it in a form that has elements you can take out, because it's pretty comprehensive. We try to cover a lot. So that's in the works. I do workshops also. And so I've done, student workshops as well as adult workshops. And some of those are sort of based on elements of my curriculum in terms of garden design and environmental justice, and how to set policy or work with your local administrators to do it. So I have elements, but I haven't really handed them out. I wanted to document it first. So I don't know if that answers it. Oh, here's Jocelyn. Wow.
Ellen, you have a question? Ellen, I think you maybe didn't have a question. If you have a question, feel free to just unmute and ask it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had to unmute myself. Let me start the video here. It's just wonderful to see so many here, and know that you've come out and seen the Alewife Showcase Biodiversity Pollinator Garden. Maybe I shouldn't apologize for the long name, but we decided to, Jean and Amy Myrtle and myself decided to make it a big name. So when you do learn these wonderful biological and biodiversity facts from Jean, you really do, you get to see the workings of a garden that's about 20 years, 15 years old, that came from one spot in the reservation to another. And the former group that got it started was Friends of Alewife Reservation. So it really has an interesting history that does have to do with a kind of protest and issues related to the floodplain and climate change. And so it's really a fairly broad purposed public garden that the DCR manages. Well, we're part of the DCR management. And we finally got our permit this year, thanks to Jean and Amy and myself. We got it both through the Conservation Commission and also the state DCR. So we work very closely with them in maintaining it, and we need volunteers. So if there are people here that like the garden enough to work on it, love to have you volunteer through Jean, and keep going out there. We've got plants that are 20 years old that came from behind the T-stop, and we're slowly experimenting there. But the garden still needs to be stewarded. I was out the other day watering, but some of the wonderful plants Jean has put in there seem to be doing fine. But we're looking for the loosestrife. We have to get that loosestrife out of there. It's not yet taken over or become entrenched, but we could certainly use some of these volunteers. People want to put some time into helping us out. I'm glad you're all here. I'm sorry I came a little bit late, but I get to hear Jean when she teaches the youth that come out, and so I learn a lot just from being part of her curriculum.
Thank you, Ellen. So it sounds like if people do want to volunteer in the garden, they should contact Jean. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Jean, do you mind putting your email in the chat one more time? Just so it's
Sure. No, fine. Let's see.
Do we have any other questions from our amazing presenters? Thank you, Jean. Any more questions? Okay, thank you all so much. This was wonderful. It makes me wish I had had some sort of program like that when I was in high school. So thank you all for presenting. You did a super great job. Really professional, and learned so much, and thank you. And Jean, thank you for doing this important work. And
my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for this
Great.
opportunity for these brilliant presenters. They wow me every time I hear them. Love you all.
Thank you all so much. And thanks for attending the meeting. And I will be sending a recording out to anyone who registered, so all of you, tomorrow. And I will see you in September.
Yay. Okay, thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.